No rational argument will have a rational effect on a man who does not want to adopt a rational attitude. Science may be described as the art of systematic oversimplification. Whenever a theory appears to you as the only possible one, take this as a sign that you have neither understood the theory nor the problem which it was intended to solve. True ignorance is not the absence of knowledge, but the refusal to acquire it. No book can ever be finished. While working on it, we learn just enough to find it immature the moment we turn away from it. All life is problem solving. Those who promise us paradise on earth never produced anything but a hell. Our knowledge can only be finite, while our ignorance must necessarily be infinite. A theory that explains everything explains nothing. I remained a socialist for several years, even after my rejection of Marxism. And if there could be such a thing as socialism combined with individual liberty, I would be a socialist still. For nothing could be better than living a modest, simple, and free life in an egalitarian society. It took some time before I recognized this as no more than a beautiful dream, that freedom is more important than equality, that the attempt to realize equality endangers freedom, that if freedom is lost, there will not even be equality among the unfree. For myself, I am interested in science and in philosophy only because I want to learn something about the riddle of the world in which we live and the riddle of man's knowledge of that world. And I believe that only a revival of interest in these riddles can save the sciences and philosophy from an obscurantist faith in the expert's special skill and in his personal knowledge and authority. Philosophy is a necessary activity because we, all of us, take a great number of things for granted, and many of these assumptions are of a philosophical character. We act on them in private life, in politics, in our work, and in every other sphere of our lives. While some of these assumptions are no doubt true, it is likely that more are false and some are harmful. So the critical examination of our presuppositions, which is a philosophical activity, is morally as well as intellectually important. We are social creatures to the inmost center of our being. The notion that one can begin anything at all from scratch, free from the past, or unindebted to others, could not conceivably be more wrong. We should realize that, if Socrates demanded that the wisest men should rule, he clearly stressed that he did not mean the learned men. In fact, he was skeptical of all professional learnedness, whether it was that of the philosophers or of the learned men of his own generation, the sophists. The wisdom he meant was of a different kind. It was simply the realization, how little do I know? Those who did not know this, he taught, knew nothing at all. This is the true scientific spirit. A rationalist is simply someone for whom it is more important to learn than to be proved right. Someone who is willing to learn from others, not by simply taking over another's opinions, but by gladly allowing others to criticize his ideas and by gladly criticizing the ideas of others. Always remember that it is impossible to speak in such a way that you cannot be misunderstood. There will always be some who misunderstand you. But the secret of intellectual excellence is the spirit of criticism. It is intellectual independence. And this leads to difficulties which must prove insurmountable for any kind of authoritarianism. The authoritarian will in general select those who obey, who believe, who respond to his influence. But in doing so, he is bound to select mediocrities. For he excludes those who revolt, who doubt, who dare to resist his influence. Never can an authority admit that the intellectually courageous, i.e. those who dare to defy his authority, may be the most valuable type. Of course, the authorities will always remain convinced of their ability to detect initiative. But what they mean by this is only a quick grasp of their intentions, and they will remain forever incapable of seeing the difference. The game of science is, in principle, without end. He who decides one day that scientific statements do not call for any further test, and that they can be regarded as finally verified, retires from the game. The history of science, like the history of all human ideas, is a history of irresponsible dreams, of obstinacy, and of error. But science is one of the very few human activities, perhaps the only one, in which errors are systematically criticized and fairly often, in time, corrected. This is why we can say that in science we often learn from our mistakes and why we can speak clearly and sensibly about making progress there. The world is round, and the place which may seem like the end may also be the beginning. The more we learn about the world, and the deeper our learning, the more conscious, specific, and articulate will be our knowledge of what we do not know, our knowledge of our ignorance. For this indeed is the main source of our ignorance, the fact that our knowledge can be only finite, while our ignorance must necessarily be infinite. The aim of argument, or of discussion, should not be victory but progress. Insofar as a scientific statement speaks about reality, it must be falsifiable, and insofar as it is not falsifiable, it does not speak about reality. Our aim as scientists is objective truth. More interesting truth, more intelligible truth. We cannot reasonably aim at certainty. Once we realize that human knowledge is fallible, we realize also that we can never be completely certain that we have not made a mistake. We do not choose political freedom because it promises us this or that. We choose it because it makes possible the only dignified form of human coexistence, the only form in which we can be fully responsible for ourselves. Whether we realize its possibilities depends on all kinds of things, and above all on ourselves. A rationalist, as I use the word, is a man who attempts to reach decisions by argument, and perhaps in certain cases, by compromise, rather than by violence. He is a man who would rather be unsuccessful in convincing another man by argument than successful in crushing him by force, by intimidation and threats, or even by persuasive propaganda. It is complete nihilism to propose laying down arms in a world where atom bombs are around. It is very simple. There is no way of achieving peace other than with weapons. We may become the makers of our fate when we have ceased to pose as its prophets. Our knowledge can only be finite, while our ignorance must necessarily be infinite. We must plan for freedom, not only for security, for no other reason than that only freedom can make security secure.